Here we go. All right, so here we are. Ryan, we finally got in the ring together. This is good. I'm excited. Um, so those of you who don't know Ryan, he's man, how long ago did we meet? When did we meet? 2007?
7 or 6, yeah.
I
Yeah.
looked on your LinkedIn profile and because I was like, I got to do his bio because people will be interested in where you've been. You literally do not. you took off a Creative Health on your bio. Your
Oh
bio.
yeah. I think I say Ascension?
You don't even say like Cron. I'm like Crondelet. I'm like, what the where
Yeah.
is the creative in here? I'm trying to figure out when we knew each other. I'm like, when did we work together?
Yeah. I only worked at Ascension Ministries, so I felt like it was okay to just kind of highlight that I was working with Ascension at the time. Now that it's called R1, I guess I could probably put it back on there, but
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure some of the creative people watching this now will be laughing. So, anyways, you're currently the chief revenue officer. It's a very big title, by the way. It's like I love that. And Northern Arizona Health System in Flagstaff, which you love.
I do.
You were at Liberty before then in Kansas City. You're a Kansas City guy, right? I just remember correctly.
I grew up
Uh,
in rural Kansas, but yeah, I spent probably
ooh, Kansas.
18 years in Kansas City.
Kansas City, okay. And then Cerner before that, Accretive, which we mentioned, although you don't say that. And then the Midland Group, which is a consulting group, right?
Yeah, third-party advocacy group.
Gotcha. So long storied career of rev cycle. So you've been in the business a long time. You've kind of done both sides. I'd say like you and I both kind of have that in common. We've been consulting side, the vendor side, and even in your case, EMR side. It's always an interesting perspective. So I wanted to, you and I have had lots of conversations around what's wrong with revenue cycle today, healthcare in general. So I thought it'd be fun to probably like you and I get in the ring and we talk a little bit more about it. You always like to debate.
Okay.
So I don't know if you happen to catch or people on LinkedIn who are watching this happen to catch. I wrote a series of articles and it started with the article, the first one I wrote was, is innovation in revenue cycle dead? And that got a lot of traction. People were very interested in that. Some people were kind of like, of course it's not dead, and I'm creating this product and whatever. And then there were people that were like, yeah, things haven't changed much. So part of my premise, so just like I'll give a little background. Part of my premise there was that I felt like the EMR implementations, Epic and specifically, just because Epic's become the largest, was consuming so much of people's time, energy, and dollars, and IT resources, which were already limited to begin with, that it was really just crushing anybody's ability to kind of do the next thing because it was so time intensive and labor intensive. And I'm talking on a larger scale, so not just like every individual hospital has its own thing or health system. I would say that I've not changed my mind, but I would say that there's another issue that I still see happening, and I would say that it's the inability for leaders to make decisions has really kind of crushed a lot of what I thought was kind of we were starting down a path, and part of why I say that is I think there's a couple of reasons. It's not always just the leader themselves, like they can't just make a decision. I think that's not always the case. I actually think that it's more driven by the fact that they're not being given kind of full empowerment to make the decision, or feel like they can't make the decision. So a lot of that comes back to like I had a whole thing around kind of like that, you may not need to like outsource it, but pulling it out of the organization so you create your own HR and IT resources and make your own decisions, like was part of the answer. So I'll pause. I want to get your feeling on kind of get your thoughts on kind of like why aren't we innovating at the level we were or should be?
Yeah, so I got a couple things written down here based on what you were saying, and I don't know that I completely agree that it's an inability to make decisions. It's it kind of goes back to what you were talking about. Is you've got the Democrats and the Republicans, basically the two-party system with Epic and Cerner, and they are. I feel like they're both incentivized to keep it a two EMR system. I mean, you can throw Meditech or Allscripts or something in there, but those might as
Not
well be
really.
the green party at this point.
Right. like,
Um,
like the
but
independent. There's like two. There's a two left.
yeah, I mean, it's Epic and Cerner, and I think they are highly incentivized to keep it a two-party system, even though they call themselves competitors. The problem is, so to your innovation comment, I think that it's hard to innovate because any innovation has to play well with those two players. And so you've got this two-party system that says they're driving innovation, but they're not really driving innovation. I'll use my Cerner experience as an example, and I certainly don't mean this as a derogatory comment towards Cerner, but they aren't healthcare people. They're software people,
Sure.
and with a few revenue cycle people that work in there. And frankly, my experience when I was there for 2 years is that the revenue cycle operators weren't really listened to, and it's probably why I'm not there anymore. Is that I couldn't get traction on this idea of revenue cycle is this thing over here that doesn't need to be cool bells and whistles. It just needs to be a functional workhorse system that does what revenue cycle operators need it to do.
It's like an afterthought. It's like like I always said, medical would always be like clinical care would always be primary, which it should be, but it's like everything else is just an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, we need to build that.
I 100% agree, and I will say that I think PowerChart, I think Cerner's EMR is the best EMR in the world. I will say that not as a former employee, but I think that it is the best EMR in the world. But the business applications that are there to support it are not very good. And so I mean, granted, I think foundationally you'd rather start with a great EMR than a great business platform, but they don't have to be binary. It's okay to go ahead and say, yeah, the business applications work pretty well too around this really world-class EMR. On your ability to make decisions topic, again, I don't know if it's an inability to make decisions or the fact that those decisions are often feels like controlled by your EMR vendor too, right? So it's very hard for me to make decisions outside of the vacuum of bringing Cerner to the table and say, is this going to be interoperable or is it not? And so you're limited in your choice of kind of innovation to those select partners that Cerner and Epic have said they play well in our sandbox, and these are your choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so these outside entities that are probably really doing what we would call innovation, because the rest of them are just saying we're doing what Cerner or Epic asks us to do, and we're trying to make it interoperable and work well within their platform.
Right.
The rest of the people on the peripherals almost have to figure out, one, how you can allow the two-party system to let you into their group and play well with them, or you've got to innovate on the outside and make it so interoperable that you can bypass the EMR vendor. And the other thing I would say about an inability to make decisions is organizationally. And I'm fortunate. I'm really, really fortunate in Northern Arizona that I've been given a lot of autonomy and leeway to build the kind of revenue cycle operations that I've wanted to build for 10 or 12 years. And really haven't been able to do so since I arrived here 4 years ago. But revenue cycle, I think in most hospitals is an afterthought. It's something that, where you magically probably send out a paper bill still, and then they like a courier on a horse delivers you some cash on a money that has a bag that has a money sign on it. And then you go.
There's little elves like putting things together, like just
right.
like paper, like I'm stuffing envelopes.
And so I do think the revenue cycle organizationally is thought of as an afterthought. And so any innovation or any inability to try to make progress is the last thing that you get budgetary or capital dollars to use, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, so is that, it's like, you're fortunate. Do you think that the average leader of, let's just say the average hospital out there, what do you think they're stuck with? I mean, my guess is like I've been in 60 hospitals in a consulting arrangements, and those would have a wide variety of probably their ability to pull something off. I don't know.
Yeah, I probably have boots on the ground in around 60 or more as well, and so I'll tell you. I mean, it's kind of what's wrong with revenue cycle. If we're going to kind of get back to what we started with is the revenue cycle is still considered the CBO, or patient financial services. I think by most health systems. In fact, early on when I arrived here, revenue cycle is referred to even by my senior leadership peers often as the CBO, and they don't say that anymore, and because we've taken the time to kind of to correct that. But I think one of the biggest problems is that we are too CBO focused as well. I would say most, let's say 70% plus at least, of revenue cycle leaders grew up in the CBO. They were a PFS director, they were a CBO director, and then inherently grew into a revenue cycle leadership role. But to me, the CBO is a lot of what's wrong with the revenue cycle in healthcare. And not the folks, not the people that are down there working their butts off in the CBO, but we tend to get stuck and siloed there because, one, I think it's really where you get the data to try to provide meaningful action, whether that's innovation or just process change. But it keeps us siloed and away from the rest of the clinical realm as well. And so if you grew up in the CBO, you do not understand the importance of patient access and what it's like to interact with another human who's sick and really needs some health care. You don't understand what it's like to interact with a doctor who's frustrated because they're spending so much time in the EMR. So I do think that the CBO becomes almost this harbinger of waste that continues to be a harbinger of waste. And it continues to be where we perpetually invest people, but we never fix the process. And so we just perpetually fight the same problem over and over again, and we call it the cost of doing business. And so you throw your humans at the one process that I think in revenue cycle that is industrialized and should be automated in a very, 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 very high way.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been kind of like, well, I mean, for a long time, they were just in like the basements, right? Most billing shops were like in the basement.
Yeah.
Like, and they're like, oh yeah, like that's just where like, that's where all the stuff ends up, like that went wrong.
That's just where we bring in $620 million of cash every year.
It's no big deal.
No big deal.
It's no big deal. I mean, so it's like, oh yeah, it's in the basement. Those guys are doing something down there, So you've taken a totally different approach. I mean, I know we've talked about this, you and I, many times. So you've taken the approach of, I'm going to build relationships with my physicians, right? Am I characterizing this correctly? I'm going to build relationships with my physicians, and I'm going to start to shift the focus of the organization. So the organization is looking at this in a different light.
Yeah, I would say that I don't really focus on collecting money, which sounds weird. I absolutely measure it, and I make sure that it's still coming in.
You might get fired after this interview. This might be the shortest interview in history, like, to your career.
No, but I think you've probably heard me say cash isn't a goal; it's an outcome. It's much like when docs take care of people. I've done presentations on evidence-based revenue cycle, right? It's no different than evidence-based medicine. And by the way, there's no other kind of medicine than evidence-based medicine. So, right? And really,
go on a whim here. I'm not going on a whim,
right? But if you think of revenue cycle the same way, of instead of chasing our tail around this monthly goal, why don't we fix the problems and learn from the mistakes, and so that the money just kind of organically flows into the organization? And yes, absolutely, we have to keep our eye on that prize and make sure that it's flowing the right way. And directionally, if it's not, it does make us have to dig into the data and try to figure things out.
Yeah, but Mel Eiley told me that cash is king. So I don't know what you're saying to me right now.
I think Zimmerman said that 40 years ago, and probably in the same vein said AR days is important, but AR days is the stupidest measurement in revenue cycle too.
What? Are you telling me that what CFOs are incentivized in their comp is not the most important metric? This is.
I don't even measure.
This is like, I mean, this is news. I don't even understand. No, I'm joking. I'm joking for everyone else. So Ryan and I have literally preached this message for years and years. But keep going. I want to hear what you say about it.
So directionally, do I have to keep my eye on cash? I do. But I don't look at it as I'm chasing a goal. I look at it as an outcome because I did everything else right in the continuum or the cycle, right? And so where I focus my energy on is physician relations and patient experience. Um, I talk a lot about margin movers, right? And not all margin movers are measured in money. Certainly net revenue and cash are, but if I'm increasing patient experience, if I'm increasing appropriate volumes, if I'm increasing quality, which is primarily in the coding realm, because the code set is the foundation for every quality measurement that we have.
Right.
And those are three kind of non-monetary measurements where I'm driving a patient experience or a customer experience. And if I have happy customers, then I think that I can fix kind of the inner workings kind of on the fly of are we documenting right? Are we getting cash? Is our net revenue appropriate? And are my physicians engaged to move the net revenue number organically instead of the cash number, right? Because
Right.
I use this a lot. If this is $1 and this is 99 cents, the dollar is easier to move than the 99 cents. If cash is 99 cents and the dollar is real net revenue, and these are fake numbers, but it's easier to move the dollar to $1.02 and let the organic 99 move to $1.01 with it, while still trying to work in that delta of the 1 cent in this analogy. But if we just focus on making our docs happy and making our customers happy, gosh, isn't that what great service industries do?
You would think. I mean,
And it
the
doesn't
other indicator
bend
you
over
were
for your
mentioning.
doctors either. I mean, the foundation for my physician relationships are built on a mutual why, a mutual communication,
Right.
increased time in the EMR, and that partnership is bidirectional.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, the other indicators you were mentioning that most people are really lagging. They're just outcomes of something you're going to do well.
Right.
Like those will all naturally, just because of what you're focusing on, um, should, those will tail along and change and be right where you need them to be if you focus on the other things.
Yeah, I mean, heck, we did this at Accretive, right? We had dashboards with like 48 different measurements on it. You can't do anything with 48 measurements. I measure 5 things. I measure cash because I got to keep my eye on it. I measure AR agings because I think that's just a way better AR measurement than days. Is my stuff getting older? Am I liquidating it? And then you got to stratify that by financial classes, especially kind of commercial, government, and patient. I measure DNFB, how long it's taking me to get a claim out the door, because that helps me understand my physician relationships a little bit as well. I measure uncompensated care, and I measure cost to collect.
Mm-hmm.
And if I measure those 5 and I see issues, that directionally can get me into the other 40 some different measurements that I may need to drill down into and figure out what's going on. But man, we can get lost in data, and that becomes that siloed approach of being too CBO focused. I think too is you just as a leader get head down in the data and all of it, and you forget that the qualities of a leader are to be visible and interactive and charismatic and working on behalf of your teams.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I think it's like one of those things where we've been for so long. People have been incentivized by certain metrics. This also goes back to kind of the leader being the inability to kind of do things, because some things you're going to do are going to rise, like days are going to rise because of it. You're going to implement something, and it's like, well, yeah, they're going to temporarily go up, but you can't do it because of that. Like you can't, like, you know what I mean? Like, are you going to like, oh, the CFO's like, what's going on? Like, why are my days up? Because they are literally incentivized to they're making real money, like not fake money like the hospital money. They're making money personally.
Right.
I had a client once. I'm not going to say who, but I had a client once. My whole year was based on the fact that this CFO of a huge system was like, we need to get it down to this day's number, a number, like an actual, like you got to get below this number by the end of the year. Doesn't have to be there any other time but the end of the year. I'm like, are you joking? I worked all year. I worked my tail off all year to get this freaking number. And we did it, it was like by a miracle, like somehow. Honestly, the year ended on like a Thursday, which was like a big day for Medicare or something, I remember. Like the only reason we met hit it was because it wasn't like a weekend. I'm like, we'd have been screwed if it was a weekend. We've been like, so and every CBO director right now is laughing because it's so true, right?
I know.
It's so true. And it's just like, this is not like, just because you're going to like, this whole setup is so bad. Like I think it puts the rev cycle leader in this spot where they're not only in most places, and you've been able to do it where you're at, but probably most places are trying to either convinced that the rest of the leadership team that it's not just CBO and trolls in the basement trying to like make payments happen, and it's not separated from the clinical side, and it's not separated from the Epic side or Cerner side or IT, and then if we don't do something real about it, it's going to affect you cash wise. But I would say the other thing that's happening, I just talked to a leader yesterday. This is fascinating. He was saying his actual biggest issue is, Ben, I've been looking back, is like my costs are up 20% in 5 years. And he's like, that's not sustainable. And I was like, I agree. I don't know how to help. They went through network implementation. His costs are up 20%. Like, that's not sustainable. Like, we can't be continually generating more costs. So I just think all those kind of factors are weighing into the pressure that's put on the VP of rev cycle, which is why I probably could never do that job. I'll be honest. Like, I couldn't do the job you're doing.
I mean, I'm lucky. I found a place that supports kind of this idea, and gives me the autonomy to run the business the right way. I mean, we've taken out $3.8 million of costs in the last 3 years within the revenue cycle, and our yield improvement is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 15 million. Now, granted, what I inherited was a conifer shop, right? And I think even the most average of my peers, if you take the initiative to fire the third party, you're going to see lift because you just
nothing wrong with conifer. I mean, we're not talking about conifer per se. It's just the nature of it.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in it. You worked in it, right? And I think the one thing that 5 years at Accretive taught me is that model can't work long term, and that means that people can wildly disagree with me if they want. I just think it's all short term gains because that's the only thing I saw there, and I didn't see a long term benefit strategy where both parties would be aligned. I saw short term gains where both parties were winning, but there becomes a point where even two lines that look parallel that are 1 degree apart, over time, you can see how far apart they start getting. And I don't see a strategy for a third-party vendor to come in and outsource revenue cycle where the strategy and the benefit and of the arrangement works for 10, 15 years. I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. We could debate that. It's probably for another day.
Yeah.
for another day. This has been good. I don't know. I think this has been great, man. So let's if you could do a quick hey, plug for Leaders Forum. So tell me a little bit about why you think Leaders Forum's been what would a leader expect? What do you think's been great for you? What do you like about it?
Well, I mean, if I'm being honest, it's the thing we discussed in Chicago, close to 2 years ago, whenever it was, is most every other forum like this has become a meat market for vendors, where if I'm there, I'm keeping my head down, looking at the carpet and hoping nobody grabs me or says my name, so I can get out without talking to a vendor. I think the premise of no vendor pressure is huge. Now, of course, we have third-party business partners there to help diffuse the cost for everybody else and make it something that's more affordable. But those third parties sit there and are part of the conversation. They give input. They're not touting their own company, and that's a great ground rule that I think you've set. But I think they get something probably way more valuable than setting up a booth and hoping and praying that somebody wants to stop by and take your fidget spinner or plastic cup. What they get is...
Damn it, I already ordered those fidget spinners too. That sucks.
What they get is an hour.
Definitely having those, the next one.
Yeah, I mean, what they get is an hour with some of the most progressive thinkers in this space, which is certainly what you've gathered. And they can go online and see some of the folks that you've got. But these are smart, well-respected industry leaders in both healthcare and revenue cycle space. They get an hour's worth of feedback from you on just their business. It's not, it's, hey, here's what we're thinking. Here's what we're considering doing. Here's our offering. How can we make it better? How can we tailor it better to somebody like you to potentially buy our services? And oh, by the way, 2 days elbow to elbow with 20 to 30 revenue cycle leaders is way better than 600 revenue cycle leaders walking by your booth and picking up a pigeon spitter. It's way more valuable. So I think that's huge.
Yeah. Right.
The other thing I would say that personally, for me, and oh, by the way, it helps us kind of understand a business partner better too in that space, because they're not selling. They're working elbow to elbow with it. What you find out is these are actually really smart people who really want to do the right thing in healthcare,
right.
And want to be part of the solution. For me, certainly, it's helped me build my collegial network. I mean, I know you already, but what I have built now is a network of folks who I know think not necessarily the same, but want the same outcome. Right? They want to lower costs. They want to make healthcare more affordable to our customer base. They want to deliver a service to our communities that we can be proud of. They don't want to be a dissatisfier because of sticker shock. They don't want to be a dissatisfier because they somehow ruined what was a great clinical experience through the billing and adjudication process. And so what I have found is again, a collegial network that thinks bigger and that thinks out of that kind of traditional CBO space that we talked about earlier in the meeting or earlier in this webinar.
Yeah, awesome. You said it well. I didn't even script you on that. It was great.
So, yeah, I'm unscriptable, so.
You are unscriptable. That's true. All right, this has been great, man. For those of you out there who are interested, you can DM me on LinkedIn, or you can go to rcmleadersforum.com. May 6th and 7th in Scottsdale, Arizona, at the Gainey Ranch, actually near Ryan. You can see Ryan there. You can spend more time with him. You may not want to, but I mean, you could. It is an option. He's going to be there.
my CMO is going to be there as well. And he's
that's right. Yeah.
You'd probably enjoy his company way more than mine.
Dr. Fuqua, we're excited to have him. It's going to be great. He probably has no idea what he's really getting into, but like, it's going to be amazing.
It is going to be great.
So join us that time. And I thank you again, man. I appreciate the time.
Of course. Anything, buddy.